Hey everybody, it's your good buddy Thorwald again. Before we delve into this first video on the heavy infantry, I want to talk real quickly about the terminology I'm using and why I'm using it as it is. Now we touched about the medium infantry, and I'll explain what I meant by that. But let's go back and talk about the light infantry first, and then we'll talk about the heavies. Now, light infantry, or skirmishers in the traditional definition, are soldiers whose job it was to provide a skirmishing screen ahead of the main body of infantry, harassing and delaying the enemy advance. Light infantry was distinct from medium, heavy, and line infantry. Heavy infantry were dedicated primarily to fighting in tight formations that were the core of large battles. The light infantry fought in open order, often in close coordination with the heavy infantry, where they could screen the heavy infantry from harassing fire, archery, and the heavy infantry could intervene or move forward to protect the light infantry from attacks of enemy heavy infantry or cavalry, or that light infantry could pass back through the lines. Skirmishers are light infantry or cavalry soldiers that are stationed to act as the vanguard, the first troops out, flank guards or rear guards, screening a tactical position or a large body of friendly troops from enemy observations or advances. They're usually deployed in a skirmish line. This is an irregular open formation, much more spread out in depth and breadth than a traditional line formation. Their purpose is to harass the enemy, engaging them in only light or sporadic contact or combat in order to delay their movement, disrupt their attack, or weaken their morale. Skirmishers' open formations in smaller numbers can give them a superior mobility over the regular forces, allowing them to fight on more favorable terms, taking advantage of the better position or terrain, and quickly withdrawing from any threat of superior enemy forces. Okay? Skirmishers can either be regular army, units temporarily detached to perform skirmishing, or specialty units specifically equipped and armed for such low-level irregular warfare tactics. Light infantry, light cavalry, and irregular units often specialize in skirmishing, okay? Although often critical in screening the main body from sudden enemy attacks, skirmishers are poor at taking advantage taking and defending ground from heavy infantry or heavy cavalry. So we're talking about lightly armed and lightly armored troops moving ahead of the main body of heavy or medium infantry, or protecting the flanks against enemy attack. Usually when they are attacked, they fall back upon the main line of heavy troops and either form on the wings or in the rear, and then can either flank to one side or the other. Okay? That's the light infantry. Heavy infantry refers to heavily armored and armed infantrymen trained to mount frontal assaults and or anchor defensive center of the battle line. This is different from the medium or light infantry, which are relatively mobile and lightly armored skirmishers intended for screening, scouting, or other roles, and suited for the heavier soldiers. So, let's think about this tactically. Your heavy infantry is usually your center of the line. They are the fist. They are the strong point. They're going to form that wall to stop enemy from getting through. Your medium infantry is going to be a little bit further on. They're a little faster. They're lightly armored or slightly more armored or more lightly armored. For example, in the medium infantry that I did the video on just before, they are wearing chainmail, relatively light stuff that they can move around in. It's still going to protect them, as opposed to the heavies, which we're going to see are heavily armored. Okay? Does that make sense? I hope that does. It kind of explains a little bit more. I got a couple questions on why I call a certain thing medium infantry rather than heavy infantry or light infantry. So, all right, with that in mind, let's get on to the bulk of what this discussion is going to be about, okay? Okay, so what we're going to talk about in this first little 10-minute or so section is the heavy infantry, and we're going to focus on protection for the legs. Now, when we say heavy infantry, we're talking, like I said, that heavily armored and heavily armed soldier in the ranks, usually in the center of the line, whose main purpose is to hold that ground, to hold as long as possible. He's not light armored or light equipped to perform a skirmish screen. He's not medium infantry that can move a little better. He is pretty heavily armored and is going to stick right where they put him. Okay? So with that in mind, I want you to think knight in shining armor. Okay? Knight in shining plate mail, or plate. Okay? So we're going to talk about leg defenses. Right. Now that heavily armored soldier is either going to be in the shield wall or probably back into the spear line with either a spear or a halberd. Probably a spear for the most part, or maybe a halberd, that so he can move forward and attack and do that assault. But for the order of survey, we're really talking about those heavy guys in the shield line or in the spear line. So let's talk about leg defenses. Now, when we talked about shields, it's going to cover you from about here to here. Okay? So if you're a shield fighter, you're really concerned about from about the knees down. Knees down. Now, in the medium infantry, I was mail covered to about here. Then I did have my Ragnar greaves cover the bottom. That was for the mediums, right? Now we're talking plate, leg plate defenses, or plate leg defenses, plate arms, and so have you. With a shield, you're still going to be worried about your legs. So let's take a look at a couple of different ways to do that first, before we talk about the heavy plate defenses, okay? The first one that we talked about prior was our Ragnar greaves. These are epic armory, okay? Plate, riveted defenses. They come to right at the knee, like I showed you before, okay? Strapped on all the way up to the knee. And they protect from the knee down. They don't protect that knee, so if you have that shield, it should protect your knee as well as this, providing hit points for the lower leg. Now the foot is a target as well, but we're not going to put sabatons on, at least not for today, okay? Another item is your plate greaves. This has your added knee protection all the way down. Once again, this is epic armor. Okay? Strapping to the leg, it performs that protection all the way from the knee down to the ankle. And it is pretty effective. This plate, it's fairly light. You guys could wear this too. It does offer that knee protection. This one's been banged up pretty much. This is my normal fighting gear, and I do love it when I'm doing the heavier role. Okay, straps on with the two sets of straps, and it's pretty nice. All right, so that's from the knee down. Now let's talk about plate from the hip down. When you think knight in shining armor and plate defenses, this is kind of what you think about. It's got your armored knee. It's got your upper thigh defenses with your wrap plate on the back, and it's got your lower lambs for your leg defenses. When strapped on, it basically protects you from the hip all the way down to the top of the boot. Now, for this to be effective, it has to be flexible. You have to be able to move it. These lambs provide that flex. You can kneel down in this armor. It's not terribly comfortable sometimes, but you can. Okay? Straps around the thigh, the knee, and the top of the calf hold it in place with the addition of a waist belt support system. This is heavy enough that you need a little bit more support than the rest of them. Now that comes from a single waist belt with a hanging strap. Now to show you the difference between it, I'm wearing a different kind of color belt to differentiate it from my pants belt. Strapping this to about where the hip line goes, and then you see what this attaches to. Okay? Now once again, these are epic armory. These are fantastic. I love them. I can't remember exactly which ones. This is, I think, might be the Merkwood. They've got 2 or 3 different types, and really, it's the same basic design with some added different look. This also comes in the silver if you want to do the knight in shining armor. I like the black a little bit better. but it's really preference. When strapping it on, once again, it helps to have a squire. But as you can see, most of the weight of the armor when I put it on is going to be supported by that belt. Okay? By this belt. And it takes a little bit of adjusting sometimes to get it where you want it to, because you have to worry about the nugglies. Okay? You got the wrap plate. You got the knee strap, which is here somewhere. There, that's the lower one. There it is. And then you got the lower lame strap. Okay. Now, with the Ragnars, got that little bit of overlap. And really, if we're mixing and matching styles of armor, this wouldn't be that bad. All right, let's match this. Yeah. And really we could do any other sort of greave on this as well. And this would give you full leg protection. Now normally the greave, being this is the greave, and this is the upper lame, latches in one over the top of the other. Well, we could do it like this too. Now, you would probably want to have a greave that matches your armor style rather than mix and match armor like this, but I'm just showing you how this will work. This gives you full leg protection. This is basically what a full leg would look like anyway. Okay? So, now, this is the lower leg defenses. Next thing we're going to talk about is the upper body. You start to move your way up. When you're arming yourself, you start at the feet and work your way up. Once you get the chest done, work on the arms. And then finally the head. Okay, we're going to wrap this section up. And then we're going to go on to the next piece, okay? Alright. This is the next section we're going to talk about. I know we're still talking about legs, but to get to that point, we have to talk about this. This is your Gambeson. This is a padded jack. This is also by Epic Armory. This is their Imperial line, and it is historically mostly accurate, okay? It is nice breathable cotton, and I really like it. Now, I've started to modify this by adding voiders. Now, this is chainmail sewn into the Gambeson, basically to cover those pieces that aren't protected by the plate, okay? Now, why are you wearing this, Thorn, when we know we're talking about legs? Good point. Normally, my legs, rather than having the waist belt, would be tied to the Gambeson. Historically, that's how it was done. That's what these points are for. This would support with the waist belt and tied to the Gambeson. The heavy armor of the legs would be supported by the waist and by the upper body. So you have less muscle fatigue and strain on your hips and lower legs, okay? But we are actually wearing this so we can put on our next piece of armor, which is going to be our folds and our tassets. All right? So let's take a look at that for a minute. The folds and tassets that what I'm going to talk about today are also by Epic Armory. They're a really nice piece. I like them. The folds are this piece right here, which normally attached to the bottom of the breastplate, but in this case are separate. And the tassets are these pieces, which are strapped to the folds and provide upper thigh protection. Okay? This particular piece is attached to the body by a waist belt. And when attached, if I can do this by myself. And when attached, here we go. And when attached, do provide that lower abdomen and upper thigh defenses. It ties into the leg defenses. Legs come to about here, the folds come down to about here, and the tassets protect that upper leg. Now, they can hang a little lower, but you don't really want the folds to be too far down because they are going to tie into that breastplate with these attachment points. Okay? The folds are articulated, so I can bend forward, I can kneel down, and don't bother me too much. The the attachment points for these folds to the tassets are usually strapped on, so you can't take them off. Now I'm slowly updating and painting all my armor, so that's what we see here. Those can be changed out and replaced as needed. So now, if I have my lower greaves on, greaves are tied into these, I would be plate armored all the way down, with the exception of the jigglies. Now, there was another piece that usually covered this. And let me show you what it is. Okay, now what I hadn't worn before, and what I want to talk to you about, and I probably won't wear this anyway, is usually underneath the falls and underneath the gambeson there was a chainmail skirt which protected the jiggly bits, because as we saw, legs came up to about here, tassets came down to about here, but there were still some areas that weren't protected. The chainmail skirt did protect those parts, just like the chainmail voiders on the arms protected the spots that we weren't, or that aren't covered by the plate mail, just like the chainmail throat protection protects the throat. Now, you see it on here. So this is actually just a chainmail throat protector that protects the throat for any black glances that come up into it, or off the helm into it. And would normally be worn with the voiders and the chainmail skirt to provide that extra protection. Now, like I said, for Bicoline, probably not wearing the chainmail skirt, because I'm not worried about knife thrusts and dagger thrusts into the jigglies nearly as much as I'm worried about blows to here. Now, am I going to wear a cup? Yeah, because spear thrusts to the jigglies, it's not a fun thing to go through. But with this protection, and let's put this leg back on, at least put it to where it would be. With this leg protection, as you can see, we've got multi-layer defenses. We've got the folds covering the lower abdomen. We've got the tassets protecting the upper legs. We've got the chain protecting between where the legs cover and the tassets cover. Provides that extra layer of protection. And then if we add our greaves to the bottom, we should look pretty good. We're pretty tight. All right. With that in mind, I'm going to let you go for now, because our next section is going to take about the same amount of time, about 15 minutes or so. And we'll talk about upper body defenses, basically chest plates and our breastplates. And then we'll talk about also throat protection, either with the gorget or the bivor, which is, well, we'll talk about it when we get there, okay? All right, for this time, lower leg defenses, I think we're about finished. So we'll catch you later.